Well, good morning, and as we get started this morning, it's been a rough day in Orlando, and we feel the weight of what has happened. And at both campuses, at Lakeside and here, the campus pastor will lead a time of prayer, and we will acknowledge that. For now, we're going to look at God's Word and what He has for us. So if you have your Bibles, there's one verse I didn't put in there this week. If you will, pull out your Bibles and turn to Proverbs chapter 29. And I know last week I said that was the end of the Be the Church series, but we've extended it one more week because there's some things I want to share with you about how God may be working in the church. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to do this. Next week, we're going to start a new sermon series where we're going to look at the heroes of the faith throughout the Old Testament. And each week, we're going to take one of those characters and we're going to study some things about their lives and learn about that and apply it to our lives. So it'll be David and Abraham and Jonah and Elijah. And we're going to look at some of those great fathers of the faith and learn each week something from that for our lives. And you won't want to miss that. It's going to be a great summer series as we do that. This week is Vision Sunday because I wanted to remind us some things about vision and then share some things with you this weekend as a church body for your prayer and for you to really just for your information. There at the top of your notes, you see 1 Corinthians 15:58. That is my life verse. And let me tell you how that became my life verse. When I was about 20 years old, I was a part of a team that was put together to help plant a church on the Big Island of Hawaii. Yes, somebody has to do it, okay? And so what was going on was there was a church in Waimea that had people driving from another community, and they were driving up to church, and they had 3 or 4 families in this new community, toward Kona, and it was growing rapidly, and they desired to plant a church in that new community. So we had a team that went over there, and we moved into that community, and we got jobs in that community. I was the recreational director at the community center. My roommate was the lifeguard. Some of the ladies were with us. They worked there also. And then what we would do is we would have, Tuesday night Bible study for adults, Thursday night student night. We did VBSs. We did all kinds of things to reach the people in that community with the families who lived in that community to get a new work started there. I'll never forget, about 6 weeks in, man, we had just done so much. We had prayed so much. We had knocked on so many doors and all of that. And about 6 weeks in, we had grown 2 more people. 6 weeks, we'd grown 2 more people. And that was a student and a child, a brother and sister, that their parents let them come to the student ministry and to the children's events. And I remember going to bed that night and just really questioning, God, we're doing everything, and it seems like nothing is happening. And I just struggled, and I'll never forget that night going to bed and just depressed that we weren't seeing more fruit, and really not seeing hardly any fruit. So woke up the next morning, and I was reading through the New Testament at the time. And the next morning, I started in 1 Corinthians 15, and I usually read about 5 or 6 chapters a morning because I had about 3 months to get through the New Testament. And I woke up the next morning and I read, starting from 1 Corinthians 15. And when I got to verse 58, I couldn't go any farther. I knew in my mind, if I'm going to stay, on task, I got to finish this, but I couldn't go any farther. It's as if God spoke directly to me through that verse. Now, understand this. I'm not saying I read that verse and I said, okay, I'm going to claim that verse, right? I read that verse, and it was as if God was speaking audibly to me as I read that verse. And I shared it at with our staff at breakfast that morning. And you see it there on the top of your notes. Therefore, my dear brothers, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. It's as if that verse spoke to everything that I was feeling at that moment. So I shared it with our team at breakfast that next morning, and I got to tell you, instantly things started happening. I can't remember what day that was, but whatever meeting we had that night, it was like people showed up that we'd never seen before. I remember the next time we had our adult Bible study, we had people knocking on the door throughout the day asking, now, what time is the Bible study? People were showing up to the fact that we had to move to bigger venues, and when we left, there was a very strong core of which a church was birthed out of that. A couple of years ago, we had the privilege of going back over there and drove by the church on a Sunday morning. The parking lot was full. They have 2 services, and God blessed that effort. And we were just a small part of a whole lot of work that went into that. But that became my life verse. Therefore, dear brothers, sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor is not in vain. And really, that's a verse that I want to kind of be a verse that leads us as a church, right? That we're constantly doing, standing firm and giving ourselves fully to the work of the Lord, knowing that there are eternal rewards for that. I ask you to turn to Proverbs 29:18. Now, this is a very familiar verse. Many of you probably know it from the King James Version that says, where there is no vision, the people perish. But the NIV version, I think, even says it better. Where there is no revelation, the people cast off restraint, but blessed is he who keeps the law. What this verse is saying is people need to see where God is leading and what God is doing, and then blessed are you when you walk in obedience to that. So I want to share with you just for a few moments this morning what God is doing and where God is leading and where he might be leading, and see how he leads. First of all, I want to remind you some things about our church. First of all, there in your notes, our mission of our church. We've covered this over the last 6 weeks, so you know it. But our FBC Windermere exists to help people be the church. And what we've said throughout that whole series, church is not some place you go to. Church is somebody that you are. It's not a place, but a people. That we're the church gathered today, and that we will leave here the church scattered to go and live out our faith and to be salt and light every place that we go. We do it through 4 steps that we talk about by helping people, first of all, believe in God. And one of the things that's a passion on my heart is that I want to make sure people understand that salvation, that true belief, is not church attendance, it's not being religious, it's not being baptized, but it's an act of faith where we give ourselves to Christ and we live for him from that day forward. In fact, the verse that keeps me up at night, if there is one, is where on the day of judgment, Jesus said there'll be those who come to him on that day of judgment, and they will give their religious credentials. Man, we cast out demons in your name. We did all this religious stuff, and he will answer them, depart from me, I never, anybody know? Knew you. I don't want anybody who's sitting under my preaching, anybody who's a part of this church, to hear those words on that day. And so that's why we're so intentional about what it means to truly believe in God. If you truly believe, it's going to change the way you live. If you truly believe, you're going to know that you believe. And so we look at that. Belong to his family. Is the second step. You know that you will never be an obedient, joy-filled Christian outside of a connection with the church body. There are things that you need as a Christian that will only be available in a church family. There are commands that you can only obey through a church family, and there are things that God has for you to do that you can only do through a church family. We believe everybody needs to belong. Number 3, to become a 5W disciple, that our whole journey is to become more like Christ once we become a Christian. And we have 5 W's that kind of define what a 5W disciple is. The first W is that we say a disciple is somebody who worships God both corporately and individually. That it's somebody who lives by God's word. It's somebody who contributes to God's work, impacts God's world, and walks with God's people. Our 5 W's that we understand worship is a lifestyle. It's what we do all the time, not just when we come to church. That God's word is our guide, that we don't come to sit on the sidelines, but be engaged, be a part of what God's doing, that we're to think beyond even Windermere and make a difference around the world, and that we live in community with others. And then lastly, the last B is that we want everybody to live beyond themselves, that God has created you for something bigger than just your success and happiness. That being said, Jesus has a heart for those who are outside of his family. And we see that in Matthew 9:35-38 there in your notes. It says that Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in the synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. And when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them. Now, that word compassion there is an interesting word. It really means an emotion that moves him almost to sickness, is what that compassion. He's moved so much that he's almost physically sick. It's a powerful word. He had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." Jesus saw the people and he was moved at the great need. And so he said, since there's such a great need, pray that my church would be there to meet those needs. And you know, as a church, we've said we need to be in community with each other. We need to gather and worship together weekly on the weekend. We need to pray for one another, encourage one another. We need to visit the sick and encourage those who are down. And all of those things are true. But we also need to understand that the church's mission is greater than those. And in fact, here's what Jesus is saying, is that all around us, we need to realize there are sheep without a shepherd, and we need to let them know that they can find direction. There's a great shepherd, a good shepherd, a loving shepherd who wants to know them. And the next verse I put in there kind of shows how passionate Jesus is about this. He talks about those being invited into the kingdom, and he talks about how the Jews have had the first opportunity to receive him, that he's a Jew. And he does it through a parable, but then when the Jews rejected him, he said, now go out and invite others in. And they went out and talked about the Gentiles, and they invited those in. And he said, but there's still room. And then here's what the master said at the end. Then the master told his servant, go out to the roads and country lanes and make them come in so that my house may be full. In the King James, it says, compel them to come in. Probably a better translation. But notice his heart, that my house may be full. Now, he's not, quite honestly, talking about the church. He's talking about the kingdom. He's talking about heaven. And it just shows God's passion and desire that everyone would come to know him and to be in heaven with him. All of that is the foundation. I want to share just a little bit about what's going on in the church and then how maybe God may be leading us as a church. Be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. I really believe that as a church, we're being faithful to 1 Corinthians 15:58. Last week, I talked about being rich in good deeds, and I mentioned a few people that came to mind. And I tell you, I could have spent the entire hour talking about people who are rich in good deeds and truly are trying to serve God through all that they do. And I think about the things that are happening in the church and how God is using this church. Last weekend, you'll see in the Windermere News, man, the celebration for the soccer season at the end of the year was awesome. And you may look and say, yeah, but that's sports, that's soccer. But it's soccer with a far deeper purpose, right? And that is to share the gospel, and that the coaches and through the halftime devotions and all have an opportunity to touch people's lives with the gospel. And this last soccer season, we had a couple thousand there at the celebration. It was an amazing day. I look at the church and think about all the small groups. They're doing ministry in the community. I think about those in the church who are bringing the gospel out every place that they go, and the compassion projects. I think about a church that's willing to do 3 different styles of worship, knowing that there's 3, generational differences, and a church that really is making a difference. But it's also a church that's reaching out beyond its community. In the last couple of years, we've had 2 families that have felt a call to go and share the gospel with Mormons in Utah, and they were so compelled to do it that they sold their homes, quit their jobs, and moved almost all the way across the country, and have started a ministry there to reach that community. They meet on Sunday nights in a Bible study, and they're going out and having conversations and talking. Some of you have gone over there for prayer walks. Some are going for the VBS that's coming in a couple of weeks. And God's using that, and we're seeing people being reached. In fact, one of our church members a couple of weeks ago said, I'm driving out to Utah. I have a van, and I can bring anything out there that you want. Well, one of the best outreaches for the group that's out there right now is through diapers and formula. They live in a county that's incredibly young, and there's a great need sometimes for those who financially are struggling, and they provide diapers and formula to these families, and they're able to share the gospel in the process. Well, one Facebook post in our lobby fills up with diapers and formula, and that van was packed as they drove out there. And so this is now the diaper pantry out in Utah that you supplied and helped out. And I think about all that's going on out there. I think about the email I got this week from Pastor Eddie in Burundi. And God is really doing some great things in Burundi. If you don't know our church, we have 50 acres, we have an orphanage, we have a church, and this is the church in Burundi that we built, and Pastor Eddie preaches here, and they're seeing people saved on a regular basis. And what's really great is that this church has already planted 2 more churches, and they're continuing to reach out and expand and grow. And this is, remember last fall we packed 310,000 meals? The meals arrived on the shipment got there, and he wanted to take a picture of the food distribution that was going on, all because you cared enough to do that and are thinking more than just us and making a difference around the world. And so we see God doing some things, but then I want you to look at one more verse, Ephesians 5:15 through 16. And notice what it says. It says, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Can we say the days are evil? Absolutely. It says, make the most of every opportunity. Circle that word opportunity. Because what I want you to know in the Greek, there are 2 different words for opportunity. The first word in the Greek is the word chronos. And in the Greek, the word chronos, and it really means specific time. So if you were to ask in the Greek, if you want to know what time it is, you would say, what chronos is it, right? And somebody would say, well, it's, 9:54 in the morning. And so it's a specific time. But there was another word called kairos. And that word kairos meant season of opportunity. And here's what I want to share with you this morning real quickly. God, I believe, has us in a kairos moment as a church, a season of opportunity. And I think the only reason he does is because we've been faithful to be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. And as I've seen the things that have happened in the last couple of weeks, I just can't help but think the only reason these things would happen is because I think God trusts us for these things to happen. So I have 2 things I need to share with you real quick. First of all, in in December, I got word that a pastor in town here was going to resign. There was no more staff at the church, so I contacted them and said, anything we can do, let me know. The church is Beulah Baptist Church. It's on Beulah Road. It sits on about 7.5 acres. You really have to be looking for it to find it. But they called me back and said, look, we don't have anybody to preach. We don't have anybody to lead worship. So I went to Ray Lloyd and I said, Ray, how would you be willing to go over there and lead worship at the 11 o'clock hour? Ray, being kind of our utility infielder, said, absolutely, and he did it with joy. And so since January, he's been leading worship over there almost every weekend. Some others in our church have gone and filled in when Ray's had other obligations, but we've been providing the worship and the preaching since January. In fact, almost all the pastors have preached out there a couple times, several times. Well, they have come to us and said, for the next, for the future of our church, what we would like to do is we would like to become a campus of First Baptist Church of Windermere. In other words, they basically want to join the church and say, let's continue ministry here under the umbrella of First Baptist Church of Windermere, and let's be a campus of First Baptist Church of Windermere. That means we would be 3 campuses and have the opportunity to impact more and to influence more and to reach more. And so I want you to pray about that as we continue to seek God's wisdom on that and really discover, is this a Kairos moment that God has brought us to with Beulah Baptist Church? And so pray for that. And then as if, I'm kind of trying to process that. And just a couple days later, I had a meeting with the pastor of the Brazilian church that meets here on Sunday night. Some of you are familiar with the fact that we have a Brazilian congregation that came just a little bit over a year ago, and they were a small core. They got together and they rented our facilities on Sunday night. Well, in this last year and a half, they have grown incredibly. In fact, they run about 180 on Sunday nights now. They'll have about 40 or 20 students on a Friday night, and they're growing. And the pastor came and he sat down and he goes, we want to join your church. And I go, well, what does that mean? They basically want to be, a part of our church and no longer be a separate church, but be First Baptist Church of Windermere. And we would have a Brazilian service and it would expand. And both of these coming with just days apart, both of these opportunities coming. Well, obviously, the elders, the pastor staff, we've been meeting on this, but we really are seeking if this is a Kairos moment. Is God leading us to an opportunity to expand the ministry and what God is doing? And here's what I would say, even if, neither one of these are affirmed, and if we don't go down that path, to have these kind of offers, these kind of opportunities in such a short time says God's up to something. And we need to understand that. And so in your notes, as we close, I have 30 seconds to give you 4 points. So let's do it really quick. 4 actions that we need to all make sure that we take. The first one is follow Jesus. Follow Jesus. He's going to lead us through all of it. Let me tell you, we're to believe in Jesus, right? John 3:16, we know that. But here's what Jesus said. You want to know if you really believe in me? Follow me. Don't say you believe in me if you're not willing to follow me. My real disciples are those who follow me. Connect with others. You can read that verse in Ecclesiastes, but let me just say this. A church is stronger when you're connected with the same vision, the same passion, really believing God is leading. Every family that's connected is far stronger than a family that's not connected. Work at your work and business, people who are connected far stronger, do better work than those disconnected. In the same way, connect with what God is doing. Thirdly, discover why you were created. David said, I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and that you had the works ordained for me before I was even born. And that same thing is true for each one in this room. God has given you a purpose bigger than yourself. And then to serve joyously. We're going to need more and more involved in ministry. And notice what Peter says, each one of you should use whatever gift he has received to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. various forms, your gifts, your talents, your passions, you bring them and you use those. And then notice John 15, 8 through 11. 8 and 11. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourself to be my disciples. But don't miss this, verse 11. I have told you that so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. I hope you didn't miss verse 11. Here's what Jesus just said. I want you to understand that when you're bearing fruit, that's when your joy is going to be complete. The only time in Scripture where joy is complete is right here, when you're serving, when you're bearing much fruit. Jesus says that's when your joy is going to be complete. And that's what I want for all of us as we seek God's direction individually and as we seek God's direction through His church to be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord.